Talk about going for broke. Second week of a war that's seen more than ever as a massive gamble by the U.S. and Israel. The hitting of oil installations in Tehran over the weekend prompting retaliation across the Gulf. Also blown away, claims that disruptions to global energy security would just be a passing blip as the price of crude shot past $100 a barrel to start the week. Tehran signaling that it's staying the course with Mojtaba Khamenei, the hardline son of the assassinated supreme leader, chosen to take the reins of an under-siege Islamic Republic that's still got the means to make neighbors pay a price for Trump and Netanyahu's war. Take Lebanon, where a rocket attack by Iran proxy Hezbollah drew a deluge of fire, a ground incursion last week by Israel, and the displacement of now up to nearly 700,000. We'll hear from a Lebanese president who wants direct talks with Israel and weigh 10 days of destruction across the region of lives and livelihoods. Livelihoods affected here, the price at the pump in Europe soaring, arguably will be feeling the effect more sharply than a U.S. that's further off and largely energy self-sufficient. Good luck, though, glossing that over when France hosts the next G7 summit next June. Today in the France 24 debate, will the belligerents go for broke? Joining us from the Ardèche village of Fougères in southern France, former French ambassador to Lebanon, Patrice Paoli. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me.
From Washington, Iranian-American journalist and commentator Negar Mortazavi. How are you, Negar?
I'm overwhelmed, but thanks for having me.
All right. From Istanbul, journalist Borzu Daragahi, who writes at borzu.substack.com. How about you? Are you overwhelmed, Borzu?
Just a lot of work, yes. A lot of requests and media requests and my own work as well.
All right. By the way, you can always listen. That's right. Listen to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. Amid war and that threat of acid rain on Tehran after Israel's bombing of oil installations, this Monday, celebrations in some quarters, widely broadcast by state television after Monday's naming of 56-year-old Mojtaba Khamenei to replace his slain father. Morgan Iyer has more.
After much speculation, Iran has named a new supreme leader. Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late Ayatollah, will take the reins after his father was killed in US-Israeli airstrikes.
This assembly, after thorough and extensive deliberations and by utilising the authority granted under Article 108 of the Constitution, based on the decisive vote of the esteemed members of the Assembly of Experts, appoints and introduces Ayatollah Sayed Mojtaba Hosseini Khamenei. May God preserve him as the third leader of the sacred system of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
There are celebrations in the streets of Tehran following the announcement.
After an entire week of waiting, and of course the shock of the passing of Ayatollah Khamenei inflicted on the society, we are very glad that now the leader has been selected. Now we are sure that the path will continue with his leadership.
It was a profound happiness. We truly didn't know whether to mourn the loss of our leader or to rejoice the selection of the new one. Mr. Mojtaba is very much like his father. Of all the possible candidates, he was the most deserving and the one most similar to the late leader. But not everyone shared this joy. In one Tehran neighborhood, there are chants of death to Mojtaba.
Yeah, Negar Mortazavi, there's what's being said in front of the camera and what's being said off camera, obviously. Is it a case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss?
I mean, it's the same name, right? Same family, and also exactly the person that President Trump said he didn't want. I think he eventually cast an unofficial final vote for him. And I'm not sure if he would be the successor if this whole circumstance of war and the assassination had not happened, because we know that his father before his assassination was implying that he actually is not in favor of this succession plan because he doesn't want a reenaction of monarchy, power being passed on from father to son, which is something the Islamic Republic supposedly ended in 1979, millennia of monarchy in Iran, of the throne being passed down to the son from the father. And nevertheless, this happened. And I think it's at least one of the direct results of this war, of this attack. And it just shows a little bit of defiance from the system, but it also speaks to the sort of consolidation of power of the various institutions within the Islamic Republic, the Revolutionary Guard, the security intelligence establishments who he is close to and is seen as sort of their favorite candidate. And they're the ones on the front line fighting this war, and eventually would probably emerge after this even more powerful. And now they have their candidate in the form of the supreme leader as well.
Yeah, billed as a hardliner. Of course, many revisiting a January investigative piece by the Bloomberg news agency, which ties Mojtaba Khamenei to an under-sanctions Iranian middleman who bought high-end property in London, Paris, luxury hotels in Frankfurt. And the piece ties the new supreme leader to Swiss bank accounts. Borzo Dargahi, what do we know about the new supreme leader?
We don't know a lot. Unlike his father, he doesn't have a website full of book reviews and movie reviews. His father spoke, Ali Khamenei spoke a lot. There's a lot of speeches. As a matter of fact, some of my journalist colleague friends in Tehran joke that they could produce his speeches because he used the same line so often. So his thinking was very transparent in many ways. But I think that there's one thing that we do know about him, and I think this is extremely important and could shape and color Iran, US, and Iran regional relations for years to come. And that is that on February 28th, the supreme leader's father, mother, wife, and son were killed in an airstrike by Israel. So I don't know about this guy, if he's a Gandhi-like figure with the grace to forgive and so on, but I kind of doubt it. So I think that vengeance is going to be something that's going to be prominent in his thinking. And I think that I agree with what Nagar was saying. He was a dark horse candidate for the supreme leader. He was in the hat, but he wasn't the front runner until this happened to him, until he suffered this incredible personal tragedy. And that, I think, gave him the legitimacy to come out on top.
Patrice Paoli, only the third supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic since 1979. Negar Mortazavi, there's hinting that perhaps because Donald Trump weighed in, that increased his chances.
I don't know, but what I find interesting is that he probably has some kind of legitimacy, but he's only Hajjat al-Islam, as his father was when he was appointed the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so he's following the steps. I don't see how this can lead to anything today. He is not accepted by anyone outside Iran. He is probably rejected by a big part of the public opinion in Iran. And as it was said by the previous speakers, he will probably not embody any line of thinking lenient to negotiations. So I think it's doesn't put Iran on a track of, I would say, solving any problem. I think it's a continuation of the actual situation in which we are now, even though Iran did not choose the war that has been started a week ago.
A week ago, it's day 10 now, and we've had so much happening, as has been the case every day. This is a conflict where the Supreme Leader, reminder, was killed on the very first day. And thus an escalation which has continued. What have we had? We've had a 7th U.S. fatality reported this Monday, one Israeli killed in a fresh missile barrage, after which more airstrikes hit Iran in 3 different places. Iran, whose capital faced the risk of acid rain after Israeli jets over the weekend pounded an oil depot. A desalination plant hit in the south of Iran, but also in Bahrain, where the country's only oil refinery was on fire. the Sunni-run majority Shia kingdom on edge.
We deeply regret the unprecedented attacks that our beloved country, as well as our Arab brotherly states and friendly nations, have been subjected to. Attacks that cannot be justified under any pretext by Iran.
What is happening is that if any country, in this case the US and Israel, attack our soil and carry out aggression, naturally we are obligated to respond to those attacks. When we respond, it does not mean that we have a dispute with that country. It does not mean that we want to upset the people there.
That clip by Iran's president, Negar Mortazavi, there was even an apology, right, saying to Gulf states, saying, sorry we're hitting you, we were kind of forced to do it. A lot's happened since he made that statement, though.
Indeed. I mean, some in Iran are also arguing that maybe even that more moderate approach led to the hardening in the final vote of the council to announce a hardline supreme leader, commander-in-chief as soon as possible so that the mixed messaging and the mixed signals don't get out there. But, you know, also as far as Iran's policy, I mean, first of all, let me just reiterate, and you reminded your audience, this is very much a war on Iranian civilians. One of the first targets was a girls' elementary school in the southern city of Minab. 180 people killed, most of them children, elementary age. This is before Iran had even started hitting back. It wasn't in the thick of war, the fog of war, or anything. It was one of the first targets, and it was hit twice, but that was half an hour, 40 minutes in between. So part of the school was taking shelter in a room, and then comes the second strike, and now it's being investigated, as Human Rights Watch says, potentially as a war crime. So, and then we see civilian infrastructure, homes, TV stations, hospitals, oil refineries, all of these targets. I mean, talk about alienating part of the Iranian society, at least, that was very much pro-West, pro the US, potentially somewhere even pro-war, assuming that there is a magical surgical way of coming and changing the regime without harming a lot of civilians. And now they're changing their minds. You're hearing more and more from people on the ground essentially saying, I was wrong or I was delusional. And this is just very much a war on civilians, already over 1,200 killed. So I think Iran is, as far as the Gulf, Iran is just facing bad options. They took a very risky gamble with these GCC countries that host US bases. Essentially, Iran sees them as complicit or indirectly involved in the war by hosting these US bases and the various different usages of these bases, which are all essentially part of the command and control of the CENTCOM all the way to Florida here in Tampa. And they went to these GCC states, essentially threatening them, saying, you know, we have no problem with you, but if this war starts by the US, we see you as complicit, your bases as part of the operation, and we're going to hit you. Before the war, that started kind of a constructive diplomacy. These GCC states were pushing the White House a lot, lobbying against the war, telling Donald Trump, don't do it. This is going to be dangerous. It's going to impact all of us. It will be a regional war. These Iranians really mean it because they were seeing this day. And then when the war started, essentially when they couldn't stop it, now Iran is just left with bad options. They made the threats. Now it can't be seen as a bluff. They're making good on those threats. Now, how exactly it's rolled out, the various command and control or the different ways of operation inside Iran is the details. But in general, the Iranian outlook in this defense or in this new policy was that we're going to turn this into a regional war, and we're seeing essentially all of these countries with US bases as one way or the other complicit or indirectly involved in the war. And it's just a very dangerous gamble, and it's also going to impact Iran's relationship with these countries for a long time to come.
Ambassador Paoli, you served in the Gulf. How much of a gamble was Iran taking, or was it the only option it had?
Well, I agree with what Negar Mortazavi just said now. I think there's only bad options. The thing is, we cannot be surprised by what is happening now. First of all, as was said previously, we have to see what is going on in Iran. The strikes in Iran were aiming at military objectives, probably political objectives, but also infrastructures today. So if you compare it to other wars, if you compare it to the war in Ukraine, there are similarities in the way the operations are conducted. They are designed to hit not only military targets, but infrastructure. So this is in Iran. The Iranians, as I said, probably don't have many options to retaliate. They are hitting a number of objectives. I think they are harming their relations with.
So hang on, you're comparing it, Patrice Paoli, you're comparing it to Ukraine. Are you suggesting that when Israel hits an oil depot in Iran, it's acting like Russia does in Ukraine?
I think that you have to name things. I mean, what is happening today, it was a war which was launched because of a so-called imminent threat against Israel or the United States, which is not the case, obviously, and the goals are not very clear. Today, the strikes are hitting different objectives, including objectives which are not military objectives. This is a fact. Now, going back to the Gulf, probably the Gulf countries, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar did not want, and Oman, of course, which was helping out in the negotiations on the nuclear file between Iran and the United States. Nobody wanted any military action, so they are hostages of the situation which has been created by the war. Which had been started 10 days ago now. So what is striking me is the fact that the UAE today issued a statement saying that they would not use their territory for any actions against Iran. So they're probably trying to keep it low. The surprise also is that they have been able to respond to the strikes by missiles or drones against their territory, and they have shown their capacity to react. Now, in the long run, I think that the relations between Iran and some of the Gulf countries were not probably very good before, and they're not going to improve. But I think that this will be a blow. How can you build confidence with what is happening now? And I think that Iran took a very big risk by striking at those countries.
In the long run, Borzo Daragahi, what goes further south? Relations between those Gulf countries and their Iranian neighbor, or relations between those Gulf countries and the United States?
I mean, these Gulf countries are integrated into the U.S. security infrastructure for the region. I mean, the Iranian strategy is transparent. And by the way, we should warn, and I mean, we should note that Iranians have been warning that this is exactly what they would do in case they were attacked. And they've been saying it for years. There's no huge shock here. I don't understand the Trump administration.
Yeah.
They didn't speak to one of their Iran experts in the State Department or the Defense Intelligence Agency or the CIA, because Iran has been saying that this is exactly how they would pursue this conflict. And the other thing that I would just say is that, of course, they're going to do this because the U.S. has a limited number of interceptors and anti-missile shield type systems, and you have to use them. You have to get the U.S. to use them all up so that Iran's missiles can make an impact and they can increase the cost of the war. As for hitting oil infrastructure, Iran was hit, I think, 30 times by Israel, the refineries, 30 refineries in one night. Of course, Iran is going to respond. And of course, it's going to try to do whatever it can to increase the pain for the United States. It's an asymmetric war. Iran can't launch the same kind of airstrikes and Tomahawk cruise missiles against the U.S. that the U.S. can launch against Iran, but it can jack up the price of oil and it can bring up price of everything. You know, like I was reading about how aluminum companies are basically jacking up prices because of this crisis. So the cost of cars is going to go up. The cost of everything is going to go up. This is the kind of the offensive dimension, just as Vietnam was looking ahead at the elections of the Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968 and tailored its war strategy to take that into account. So Iran is also tailoring its war strategy to take U.S. domestic politics into account.
Yeah, well, before you talk about the United States, the average cost for diesel at the pump here in France soaring to above €2 a liter this Monday. That's on average. Brent crude oil easing off a morning high of $119 a barrel. It's been years since we've seen those kinds of numbers. Markets scrambling. G7 nations, for now, holding off a coordinated release of their strategic reserves to ease the pressure. Keep calm and carry on, the message of the U.S. president. This is the post he put up earlier, Donald Trump. Short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over, is a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. Capital letters, only fools would think differently. Does that make you a fool, Borzou Dargahi?
I don't think it makes me a fool, but it's going to make Trump a fool. I would note in that Truth Social post, all of a sudden the goal has changed back to just the nuclear program again. I'm not sure how that works. You know, I mean, look, this is a war that he was convinced to launch. I'm not exactly sure why, but it does seem like that it was Israel that was sort of pushing him into doing this. I have heard Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel for like almost my entire adult life saying that, you know, Iran is going to be a nuclear threat. And he has been trying to get every single president that he could get his hands on to launch this war. And as one US politician put it, Trump was the only one stupid enough to go along with it.
Negar Mortazavi, back in 2003, I remember the polls in the United States where you are. There was perhaps a slim majority against the campaign, but then once the fighting began, there was a rally round the flag moment. That's when they started talking about freedom fries, by the way. And there was this rally round the flag, and people in the United States supported their troops in that campaign. What's it like this time? Again, it's day 10 of the war. Are people rallying behind the troops, rallying around the flag in the U.S.?
Yeah, like Borzou, I do remember. I was a young reporter in my college newspaper back then. And, you know, the difference between those wars, I also want to remind everyone, both regime change wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, the administration at least pretended to consult with the American people. They went to the U.S. Congress before attacking. They consulted with the international community. They went to the UN Security Council. We remember the Colin Powell and the lie of the WMDs, which, by the way, I think now the nuclear threat is now the new lie, the new WMD for this war, because Iran's nuclear program was supposedly obliterated in last June in Operation Midnight Hammer. That statement still exists on the White House, on the website of the White House, and the president has time and again said that the nuclear program was completely obliterated. But anyways, back then, at least there was some resemblance of trying to get the allies, NATO, Europeans involved. This time, none of that. In the middle of negotiations, while another round was actually scheduled in Vienna for expert talks, supposedly on the nuclear program, and just a couple of days after the last round in Geneva ended, they launched this massive war. And very similar to the pattern they established in June also, Iran and the US were negotiating, again, nuclear negotiations, and then sort of in the middle of negotiations, while another round was scheduled, the Israelis went ahead with US green light, and then US joined. It's still an unpopular war here in the U.S. Poll after poll is showing the majority of American people don't want another regime change, endless war in the Middle East. They understand Iraq, Afghanistan were failures. We're also hearing more and more voices in the U.S. Congress. Obviously not the Republicans, they're towing the line of the party, of the president, but Democrats are very vocal against it. We saw the vote in the U.S. Senate. Everyone voted along the party line, all the Democrats except for one. Senator Fetterman, and especially when you see attacks like, for example, that attack on the elementary school or the attack on infrastructure or this big cloud of smoke all over Tehran, a city of 10 million. These things are having very serious impacts that usually when you look at, for example, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, these images would emerge years later and impact the public opinion. But here in this war, it's just on day one. It also shows the recklessness, the callousness, the ambivalence to the impact. We hear from the Secretary of Defense or War saying there will be no quote unquote stupid rules of engagement. There will be no quote unquote politically correct war, as if this is how they intended to fight the war and this is what they're proud of, and really referring to it sometimes in terms that make you feel like you're in a video game.
Yeah, at the same time, it's not a video game, it's real for the people in Beirut. We'll show you one image that was caught on social media this Monday, a building of the Hezbollah-linked Al-Qard Al-Hassan Credit Union. They give zero interest loans to people in Shia neighborhoods. directly struck, some 120,000 fleeing the capital, nearly 700,000 displaced inside of Lebanon since Israel began its bombing campaign and issuing evacuation orders. Now, in a video call with regional leaders and the heads of the European institutions, Lebanon's president blasting Hezbollah for its March 2nd launch of missiles on Israel, accusing the militant group of, quote, seeking the collapse of the Lebanese state. Joseph Aoun, who's calling for direct negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. Patrice Paoli, are you surprised?
No.
Well, I haven't heard very often the Lebanese authorities asking for a direct negotiations with Israel because it was a problem internally to say such things. I think it's very interesting that they are saying it now. I think that the position taken by President Aoun is courageous. I think it was interesting also to hear him criticize Hezbollah as probably it had never been done before in Lebanon. In a time when I was an ambassador to Lebanon, Hezbollah was in parliament everywhere, all over the place, and it was a question which would have been very, very difficult to address. First, negotiating with Israel, which was done at the time indirectly through proxies or through the American help, but for the border problems. And Hezbollah would never have been criticized the way it is today. So I think it is the result of this sentiment of being the hostages of Hezbollah, which launched a war without. Our friends were saying that President Trump did not consult anyone, but Hezbollah is not the president of Lebanon. It did not consult. It waged a war against Israel again to protect Iran or to enter into Iranian policies again against the interest of the Lebanese people. So I think it's interesting. I hope that Lebanese government, the Lebanese authorities can regain authority over the country. Now, the other problem is that we haven't been talking very much about Israel until now, but Israel is talking about creating a new buffer zone in the south of Lebanon, as was done in 78, in 82. This is very worrying because what we have seen since the so-called ceasefire in 2024, Israel has not withdrawn its forces from Lebanon. It is increasing its presence daily. It is destroying objectives which had nothing to do with Hezbollah in the south. It is provoking an exodus of the population from the south, creating facts on the ground that have little to do with Hezbollah. So I think that it is today a matter of death and life, probably also for the Lebanese state to find a solution.
Ambassador Paoli, you mentioned you called the statement by Lebanon's president courageous, taking on Hezbollah. Would he have been able to do it without Israel degrading the Iran-backed militant group?
I don't know. I think that it's probably a wake-up call also. I think that he is expressing today what many Lebanese thought. When Hezbollah was hit very harshly during the previous episodes, during the Gaza crisis or the Gaza war, there were mixed feelings, as we see in Iran today, also in the population, both against Israel hitting Lebanon, but against Hezbollah, or happy about the weakening for parts of the population in Lebanon, the weakening of Hezbollah, which is a state in the state. So I think that you have this ambiguous or ambivalent feelings in the population, and that you would see in Iran, where you say death to Khamenei, and at the same time, probably part of the population seeing the effects of the war and being more anti or pro-regime in Iran. So I think it's probably the only way out for Lebanon today is to eradicate, as if it is possible, and probably, as you said, the fact that Israel has been hitting very harshly Hezbollah would help in that direction.
Borzou Dargahi, you used to hang your hat in Beirut, like Ambassador Paoli. Is this a turning point for Lebanon, this war? And if so, a turn for the better or a turn for the worse?
It's definitely a turn for the worse. I suspect that this is part of the Iranian war strategy. At some point, they were, and people were asking in the first few days of the war, where is Hezbollah? And then all of a sudden, Hezbollah drew Israeli fire and lured Israel into the country. I think that Iran is willing, and of course it's willing, to sacrifice Lebanon's security for its war aims. And this is part of those war aims. You know, it's a trap. Israel went into Lebanon and it's taken its tired soldiers who are already suffering from PTSD and whatever other ailments from Gaza and brought them into a ground offensive, weakening them further. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has, I don't know how many, a number of Israeli soldiers already killed in southern Lebanon, as well as radar and other installations taken out by Hezbollah drones. Look in the future for Iran to activate the Houthis. You know, they're talking about moving oil and gas shipments to the Red Sea because the Persian Gulf is a war zone and the Strait of Hormuz is under threat. Guess what's going to happen if they try to move the oil and gas out of the Strait, out of the Bab el-Mandeb in Yemen and through the Red Sea? You're going to have the Houthis activated. And this is part of it. This is why, look, this is why the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and the State Department and every single intelligence service and diplomatic corps of every single Arab country has been telling the United States not to do this, because this was the obvious logical conclusion of launching a war against Iran, especially a regime change war. Iran can do a lot of damage, and it's doing a lot of damage, and it will do a lot of damage. And Lebanon will just be enough to the Iranian regime. Lebanon is just another card to play.
Negar Mortazavi, yeah, the Houthis in Yemen, is that the other shoe yet to drop?
Yeah, I agree with Borzo. I mean, whatever is left of the resistance, the militias, the Iranian allied militias in Iraq, also, we're seeing a little bit of movement there, although the Iraqi government is trying to make sure they don't get involved in this. But the Houthis also, that can potentially be another layer added, because Iran here, you know, they're playing the long game, unlike the White House, which seems like the game, the literal video game. And this is not just me saying, members of Congress have criticized them for pretending like they're playing a video game. It sounds like it's day by day in the White House. You know, the reasoning has changed by the day, the justification, the plan of war. I don't even know if there is a plan, but Iran is playing the long game. For them, the goal is to make sure that they inflict enough pain to the other side while they're also taking a very hard beating. And I think they've been prepared for that. Again, another big gamble, a high cost, but also for what they think is high return. To inflict enough pain to the other side, to essentially fight with whatever they have, shoot whatever they have, and use whatever allies they have, because this is their existential war. This is that battle for survival. This is the final one. In June, that wasn't the sentiment. They felt like, we got this. They told the rest of their allies, the resistance, that they can take care of it, or in previous attacks against Israel. But this time, they were waiting for a war of existence. They had been saying that publicly and privately, Iranian officials, I've heard from sources, and that's how they're fighting this. It's essentially shooting back in a ballistic way. And yes, they're the underdog in this fight, but this is also their homeland. This is their neighborhood. This is, again, their war of survival. It's not like the U.S., who has a carrier sitting, you know, an ocean away, far away, having the military power, but not really having high stakes in this war. I mean, if you look at the damage and the casualty, of course, it's incomparable. But the long-term goal for Iran is to reestablish deterrence so that they don't turn into the next Lebanon or even the next Gaza, where the U.S. and Israel feel like they can go in and mow the lawn or mow the grass every 6 months, as they have now done in the past year.
On that point, Patrice Paoli, the past year has been looking at Syria, where the Iranians lost their foothold. Is it a state of increased instability? Is that written, or is the future unwritten when it comes to what happens with Iran and the region in the terms that have just been described there by Negar?
Well, the main destabilizing factor for the time being, to as far as I can see, is the way international law is despised by many actors, but the policies of Israel today, I don't see what the end game is. I don't see what the objective is, except not allowing anything stable to organize itself around the country. So today you have an increasing presence of Israel in the south of Syria. You have an increasing presence in Lebanon. You have the colonization settlement policies which are going on in the West Bank, with an openly racist policy to expel Palestinians, with the continuing occupation of Gaza, where Israel did not fulfill the objectives of the agreement which was signed, now launching this attack against Iran. And I agree with what Borzou Daraghi said, that probably Trump was taken into this game convinced by Netanyahu. So I see today that this destabilizing factor is probably there. What are the policies? What are the goals of Israel? And what are the goals of the Trump administration today in the war it is waging against Iran, which was obviously not an imminent threat to either Israel or the United States. So I think that we have been trying, as France, I'm not an official, but I know what kind of policy we've been trying to put into action. In Lebanon is supporting stabilization, reinforcement of the state. In Syria, we did not choose the people who are now in power in Damascus, but we chose to engage and try to stabilize the country, help the population get out of the situation in which Bashar al-Assad had driven the country. So the main destabilizing factor today, I think, is this hubris of Israel. I don't know where it leads to. I don't see where the end game, what the end game is. And the second casualty is international law, which is totally, it was not in good shape before, but today it is in greater danger. And we have to recall, as Europeans, as France, and we know that we can expect anything from Trump, from Israel, so but I would expect for a more forceful position in favor of international law, of rational positions by the Europeans.
So let's talk about that.
To come out.
Let's talk about that right now. You're seeing, you saw those live images, Patrice Paoli, of those images, from earlier in the day, of the French president when he was in Cyprus in the company of his Greek counterpart, France, Greece, Italy, the Netherlands, the latest to join in sending ships to the region. The French president visiting the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, the French aircraft carrier which is off Crete after going to Cyprus earlier in the day. Emmanuel Macron, who talked about defending French nationals, many of whom are stranded still in parts of the Middle East, but also going beyond that when he spoke earlier.
Nous avons des accords de défense avec beaucoup de pays qui sont aujourd'hui attaqués. Alors on a réagi tout de suite, on a envoyé des Rafales, des systèmes de défense antiaérien. Vous étiez ce matin à Chypre, on a vu les systèmes Mistral, on a envoyé plusieurs autres. À Chypre évidemment, aux Émirats Arabes Unis, Qatar, Koweït.
Patrice Paoli, the French president announcing again 2 more ships. I saw one report in the French press how the Navy yards, the military Navy yards are almost empty in France right now. All our ships are at sea. You're saying, calling on the French to do more. What can they do more than that?
Well, I think that there's not much we can do in the actual state of war, but there are things that we can do. First of all, to respect the agreement that we have signed, defense agreements that we signed with Kuwait, with Qatar, with United Arab Emirates, and which we are fulfilling by putting our means to help defend their territory according to those agreements once again. Second, express our solidarity with Lebanon and try what we can do. We cannot convince, I think Emmanuel Macron tried, but to no avail, to convince Netanyahu to stop hitting Lebanon, but express solidarity. And then, you mentioned it, the third point is to try to protect our citizens, which is a difficult task as well, and then put our means for the time when the war recedes to ensure freedom of navigation in the region, which was one of the goals set by the president for the presence of our navy in the region. But again, there is little we can do for the time being in the state of war with actors who do not listen to anyone. I mean, Israel or Trump. And in the long run, I think we have a problem also with the American administration because you don't have interlocutors as we used to have. You used to be able to talk to the State Department, to a number of actors. Everything is so centralized now, and the major crisis or the major problems are in the hands of 2 or 3 persons very close to the president, which does not allow for a normal dialogue to take place between partners. So it's very difficult today, I think, to find our place. And this is why I think that it is not a task for France alone, it is a task for the Europeans to speak out and be more vocal, not only on what is going on now in the Middle East, but also on other issues and the way the Trump administration is looking at the world, which I think is a threat to stability in many areas. So what is at stake also is our own credibility, and we have to face that.
Professor Dargahi, that remark that we referenced earlier by the Lebanese president calling for those direct talks, it came again during this video call with regional leaders and the heads of the EU institutions. Is Europe playing this right?
I don't think it is. I think that, as the former ambassador rightly pointed out, one of the main drivers of the instability is Israel. We just have to say it. And as for their ambitions, well, Israeli leaders say a lot, and they've said it many times, that their ambitions are territorial. They want a greater Israel. And they've been saying it for decades. And now those people are in charge, those people who've been saying they want a greater Israel. So, and that's why they are expanding their territory, and they want to get rid of any existential threats in the region. So I think that one thing they could do, the Europeans, is to treat Israel like they treat Iran, as a pariah state, because it has been behaving like a pariah state.
Negar Mortazavi, what's the feeling where you are when it comes right now to Israel?
I mean, this country is very split, of course. That kind of support is very much lowering, degrading among the American public. We're seeing polls, especially among the Democrats, but even in the Republican Party, sort of the MAGA base or the more restrained, who are critical to these forever wars and to the U.S. militarism and engagement in the region and the amount of blood and treasure that has gone into this. And people are making more connections. AIPAC has now become controversial. Getting support from AIPAC, the Israel lobby in U.S. Congress, is now something that, at least in among some districts and members, is looked down upon. And we see, for example, little signs here and there. The election of Zoran Mamdani in the largest city in the U.S., the Tel Aviv of America, which is New York. That was a very big sign. The fact that 30% of New York Jews, 30-something% of Jewish voters voted for him. You look at the younger generation of American Jews, it's even higher. 70% voted for Zoran Mamdani. There's a very strong opposition or criticism to what they see a form of apartheid in how Israel is treating Palestinians. Genocide is the war in Gaza seen here. And it really impacted. It had a very serious, significant impact in the turn of events in the U.S. presidential election. It was one of the key reasons that Kamala Harris and the Democrats lost, at least in many states in the U.S. and among many bases of the Democratic Party. So I think it's shifting. Of course, it's going to be very slow. Policy doesn't catch up to public opinion, but in the public opinion, I think it's shifting. And I want to echo what the ambassador said on Borzu, that it's more and more seen Israel as a driver of instability, the reason for continuing the war on civilians in Gaza, now launching the war on Iran. The reasons are unclear. Why the U.S. is involved in this, unclear. And finally, it's ironic that Benjamin Netanyahu has been pushing for this war for 2.5 decades with different U.S. presidents. And finally, he found an ally in the president who calls himself, quote unquote, the president of peace, and thinks he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for ending wars around the world.
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. So much more to talk about, and we'll be getting more perspectives on this on Tuesday's show. I want to thank you, Negar Mortazavi, for being with us from Washington. I want to thank Patrice Paoli joining us from southern France, and Borzu Daragahi in Istanbul. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.